Hi, good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Um, Good evening, everybody. I want to let you know up front that we're going to be muting our guests during the presentation, and we recommend that you choose the speaker view, which is in the top right corner of your screen, so you can view the screen in full. So good evening and welcome to tonight's presentation. I'm Sharon Mastrebecki. I'm the Director of Development here at NAMI Westchester. And we know you will enjoy this evening's discussion, Once a Warrior, Always a Warrior. It's a mental health awareness program for active and veteran military and their families and professionals. We will hear from our featured speaker, Dr. Hoge, followed by a powerful group of panelists who will all take questions from you in the second half of this presentation. On tonight's panel, you will hear from Allyson Harasimowicz, Blue Star Families, the New York Chapter Director, Joe Hunt, the Director of Veterans Mental Health Coalition of New York City, Alan Ivicic, he's the Director at White Plains Vet Center, Aaron Leonard, Sierra Club Military Outdoors, Andrea Molina, Family Services of Westchester, and Matthew Ryba. He is the Director of Community Outreach and Education at NewYork-Presbyterian Military Family Wellness Center. I want to also thank our sponsors, NewYork-Presbyterian Military Family Wellness Center, the Mental Health Association of Westchester, WHUD, and the Peak Radio. We will be recording tonight's presentation. After Dr. Hoge finishes, I will ask the panelists to unmute themselves, and we invite the guests to put questions in the chat box, and our speaker and panel will be answering these at the end of the presentation. And Dr. Hoge, I'd like to welcome our featured speaker, Dr. Charles Hoge. Dr. Hoge is a retired colonel, and he's a graduate of Sarah Lawrence College and the University of Maryland School of Medicine. He received specialty training and board certification in internal medicine, infectious diseases, and psychiatry, and served a total of 20 years in the U.S. Public Health Service and U.S. Army. Dr. Hoge directed psychiatric and neuroscience research at Walter Reed Army Institute of Research from 2000 to 2009. He was deployed to Iraq in 2004, and then to Afghanistan as a civilian in 2011. He is a national expert on war-related mental health issues and traumatic brain injury. Dr. Hoge has also testified to Congress, given a TEDx talk, and authored over 200 peer-reviewed medical articles, including some of the most cited from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. His self-help book for combat veterans and families is titled Once a Warrior, Always a Warrior, Navigating the Transition from Combat to Home. He continues to work as a psychiatrist treating service members, veterans, and family members in Washington, D.C. area. And I'd recommend to our participants, as I said earlier, to choose the speaker view if you haven't already done so. And without further ado, I welcome Dr. Hoge.
Hi, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for that introduction. And it's always a pleasure being able to, speak and see what each community is doing. Everybody's doing things a little bit differently in every community, and it's really wonderful to see the the different resources that are available for veterans in different communities. I didn't prepare any slides. I just wanted to sort of speak a little bit in general about some thoughts I've had. To me, we're at this point now, almost 20 years after 9/11. I can't believe it's 20 years now since 9/11. And it feels like it's just been a whirlwind over all those years. Most of my experience came from treating veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan, but of course we had veterans of prior conflicts coming in as beneficiaries and retirees where I worked in Washington. And but I think that the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts that started, nearly 20 years ago were unique in the sense that unlike prior wars, there was a recognition on the part of DoD and VA that there would be psychological casualties, there would be an impact, psychological impact of the war. And so unlike, not that psychological, concerns were certainly there in prior wars, but there was a very systematic effort to study and learn what the impact would be. And I was fortunate to be kind of in the right place in the right time and to have the support from the military leadership to go into the operational environment, to do pre and post deployment surveys, to use the latest tools that we had at our disposal to look at the impact of the war. And that was something which, previously wouldn't happen for 5 or 10 years, or sometimes even longer after prior conflicts. So we were able to look at what was the impact as the war was unfolding. And one of our first papers that we wrote, was picked up by the national media and really, highlighted the problem with PTSD. One in six soldiers have PTSD was the headline. That was a study that we did in soldiers and Marines coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. But the sub headline of that, which wasn't as emphasized in the news media, was really the thing that was most important, which was the fact that only about 20% of individuals who needed care for PTSD or depression or other war-related health concerns were able to get or had gotten any care. So this was early in the war. Things have changed. There's been a lot of effort on trying to reduce stigma, reduce barriers to care, increase the availability of resources. Many of you are involved in this in this community. And so I think that, what we saw early on was a big concern with stigma and barriers to care. And then lots of efforts, were channeled to try to change that picture that we first came, our first publication was in 2004, looking at the impact of the early period in that war. I think that, so the focus, the lens in these particular conflicts of Iraq and Afghanistan got focused on PTSD. I think to some extent that it was an over focus on those two things, because there's a lot of other things that are affect veterans, and it's not just warfare that affects veterans, but there's a lot of other stressors in life, in daily life, and we're seeing now the issues with increasing suicides, homelessness, the opioid epidemic, the natural disasters, what's going on in Texas now with the weather, the wildfires, the mobilizations of National Guard units on the home front. We're seeing a much broader impact. So war has its impact, and then these other events and experiences also have their impact. The early work that we did was really focused on decreasing stigma. It was really focused on PTSD, but I think the focus was too narrow, as I mentioned. The label signature wounds got attached to PTSD and TBI. And I think that was good in a sense, because it helped with resources and helped with helped us stand up programs, but it also, I think, wasn't the complete picture. When we started to look at how to reduce stigma, that's always a challenge. And there's a lot of things that have gone into place, including, screening programs and community-based programs, and, a lot more screening now than ever in the past, both in primary care and then, and on a population level. And then I think that some of the work that I've been most interested in over my career has been, how do we communicate and talk about war-related experiences or transitioning through life transitions that might involve other stressors than war. And I think that, when the book that I wrote, the self-help book for combat veterans, Once a Warrior, Always a Warrior, the title of that was really an effort at helping people to understand and normalize the experience of being a service member, that you don't stop being a service member when you come back from a battlefield or come back from a deployment or come back from a mission. You know, your training influences how you respond in the world. The experiences that you have influences how you respond in the world. And there's a lot of myths and stereotypes attached to veteran, and I'm sure you know you all know this very well. The stereotypes in society that the military draws from disadvantaged populations, or that everyone coming back from war is jacked up in some way or has PTSD or violent, and those are just absolutely not true. They're myths that we have to combat on a regular basis. More importantly, all of these skills that veterans learn are skills that they can apply in civilian life as well. And so they bring these skills, this wonderful set of skills that they've learned in the military that can help them to be very successful, productive in the workplace or in studies or whatever they're doing. So I think there's this element of destigmatization. The once a warrior, always a warrior title also, I was really trying to get at the fact that there's this, that we have to sort of think about things or understand things from the standpoint of the physiology of what people experience when they go through stressful life transitions or they go through warfare. And with deployments in particular, and we, those, especially those early years, but 20 years now, we have operational units that deployed repeatedly, and they're deployed repeatedly without much dwell time in between. Sometimes they were deployed almost as much as they were back in the home environment. When they were in the home environment, they were also doing training missions. So there's a cumulative toll. So there's the wear and tear on the body, carrying heavy loads and working in stressful environmental conditions. And then there's the exposure to traumatic events or combat related events. There's exposure to blasts. There's a high frequency of concussions and injuries, other types of injuries in the war zone. So that's and then a lot of these operations are at night. And so individuals' sleep gets dysregulated on an ongoing basis. So for an entire operational deployment, which might last months, the sleep is dysregulated, the circadian rhythms are altered, and those don't just bounce back when individuals come back from the operational environment. You can't, the expectation that it would bounce back is pretty unrealistic. So I think we have to kind of take a physiological, have a little bit of a physiological understanding of what people experience. I like to talk about the paradox of PTSD, that everything that we label a symptom is also an adaptive beneficial function. So, we talk about hypervigilance in here at home in our clinical settings. It's the medical viewpoint of the world is that the individual is struggling with hypervigilance, and we want to help them through that. But hypervigilance is the same thing as situational awareness in the combat zone. The intolerance of mistakes that you see a lot of times in veterans that, sometimes drives their family crazy is, attention to detail and minimizing mistakes in a hostile environment and is very important. The numbing and withdrawal that veterans experience when they get home is also related to emotional control in a place like a war zone. So everything that we label a symptom is also a benefit. And I think that kind of perspective is helpful in normalizing and helping people to understand that, they're not crazy because they're still reactive, because their nervous system is still reactive when they come back, similar to when they've been in the war zone. If I had slides to show, I have these wonderful slides from the 1800s of the autonomic nervous system, which I can send you, Sharon, and you can send out to folks if you like. But it's from a neuroanatomy book that I found in Italy, in an antiquarian bookshop. And the limbic system is the fight flight part of the brain, and there's no time in the limbic system. The cortex the cortex is what makes us human in a sense, and that's where we sequence and time and so forth. The perception of time is in that area of the brain. Well, the limbic system is very reflexive, the fight flight process, and it connects directly to the brainstem and the autonomic nervous system through the 10th cranial nerve, parasympathetic nervous system. And those nerves, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves, branch out into tens of thousands of tiny fibrils that cover the entire gut and thorax. And there's really a second brain. So what happens when the limbic system gets activated by a triggering event, a reminder of that experience, the whole body responds, and it responds reflexively. So so it becomes a matter of, you can't really turn these reactions off. It's more about, how do you learn to dial it back? How do you learn to, navigate, to sort of integrate the experiences in a more healthy way when folks come back or have experiences like that. So I sort of take a very physiological perspective on things. I don't think this mind-body separation is really, we really need to get beyond that. PTSD is as much or more a physiological condition. And then you have the impact of injuries and concussions and so forth on top of that. I mentioned, okay, so when I wrote the book, it was we were 8 or 9 years into the war, and now we're 20 years. We've got, a lot of other things happening with veterans, with the increase in suicide and homelessness and opioid epidemic and so forth. So there's a lot of challenges now, and also the impact of COVID, just doing this meeting in this way. But the isolation associated with that, the transition of trying to transition healthcare systems to a more virtual environment, and people's comfort level with that and so forth. So some really important changes happening, as a result of COVID. So just to sort of wrap up, very briefly, maybe some key lessons learned. I think that in any community, we always have to attend to what is the most important, urgent, basic needs, our basic needs being met. If there's no electricity and it's freezing outside, and individuals don't have access to water, that's going to take the first priority over anything. I think that with the opioid epidemic, attention to things like harm reduction programs are really essential, and the community infrastructure to be able to really help people to get into treatment. I think there's huge gaps in care in that area. I think we talked a little bit about dispelling myths, of the veteran experience, to help bolster the opportunity for veterans to have educational and employment opportunities and so forth, and kind of dispel the stereotypes that are around service in the military. The social connection and community, you all know how important that is, probably maybe almost the most important thing. The family connection. I know there's someone from Blue Star family here. There's the peer-to-peer connection. The ability to get to get support from peers is invaluable. And then I think sort of having this physiological understanding of what tools might help in dialing down that reactivity. And there we have traditional clinical tools that are helpful from the medical perspective. And then there are also lots of adjunctive things. There's representation from Sierra Club here, and that's a good example. When you have programs that help individuals to get outdoors and do something that's fun or engaging or involved, whatever it is, kayaking or bicycling. There's all sorts of veteran programs, equine therapy, and these are adjunctive programs that also connect people, and which is invaluable. And then I think that one of the biggest challenges has always been navigating the mental health system. The mental health system is infinitely complex, and I wish we could make it, simpler for people to get access when they need it. And there are a lot of good treatments available, but I think unfortunately a lot of veterans will even when they get to the point of realizing that they need help, sometimes they come in and they have a bad experience with their first contact with the mental health care system, and then they get discouraged. And so helping folks to understand that, well, not all therapists have that particular approach. There's all sorts of approaches. There's all sorts of tools that are available in the clinical domain that can be helpful. So just helping folks navigate that. And then a big part of the book that is focused on really, being able to narrate one's experience, and that community and peer-to-peer connection is family connection is so important in that. So I'll just leave it at that, and I'm happy to. I'm really looking forward to hearing from the other panelists here, and if there's anything else that I can offer, or answer questions and so forth, I'm happy to do that. And thank you so much again for inviting me.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask our panelists to unmute themselves so that we can hear from some questions and answer some questions between the panelists and Dr. Hoge. And we do have a question in right now. How can veteran peers and civilian peer agencies assist the clients with mental health disorders? So who might be best for that? With that, Matt?
I'll offer
Great.
my 2 cents, because my job is basically to train civilian non-mental health providers about military culture competence and the unique needs of the various subsegments of the military community. And I think bottom line, they should have some baseline understanding of military culture. I mean, the whole notion of transition, I think, to most civilians is, oh, they're back to normal life. And that is definitely not the case. I mean, one fellow, Jim McDonough, who was the director of the New York State Division of Veteran Services, once said, transition is like being unemployed and homeless at the same time. And I think it's, and I'm sure Allyson can add to this, I think it's also like being dropped into community where you don't have any sense of belonging. So if you could imagine those three factors, plus, everything you're leaving an environment that is very structured. You know what your job is. You go to your next duty station. You have a sponsor or a buddy who shows you where things are. You know your job. You know you're going to get a paycheck. You know where you're going to live, and that's all gone. So finance is sometimes one of the biggest struggles for many of the people who are transitioning.
Anybody else? Allyson?
Well, just to go with what Joe said about, and I will also go back to Heidi's question. Coming back home from active duty, it's like your body's here and your soul is still trying to catch up. It's very difficult. When I came home as a woman and a combat veteran, this Westchester community was not prepared for someone like me. And though I have a special place for the VA in my heart, they were not prepared for me either. And it wasn't only, where's your husband? It was more like, it's impossible for this woman to have PTSD. Women are in a tent typing. I was an engineer. I was not typing. And I was not only creating camps or stopovers, I was also security and a convoy driver. I had more than one job. So the concept of a woman in combat was almost unheard of for a lot of providers. They just didn't know what to do with me and my needs. So we veterans, people forget, veterans are also human beings. And if anything, we have, I think, at times, a layer of empathy for other human beings that are struggling with mental health disorders. It took me a long time to accept that depression and anxiety are mental health disorders. I didn't believe it. So once you realize that that is a mental health issue and you accept and embrace, then your empathy, I feel, goes a bit longer for other human beings. I know that I have changed. I was a hardcore Marine. Sometimes I try to hold it down, but my empathy is what leads me in many cases. So it is not difficult for a human being to connect with another human being with a mental health disorder, is what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Andrea. Um, so one of our questions really is, as a parent of a son in the military, he has never been to war, but I can see how difficult COVID is for him, and how hard he has had it in the mandating, isolating, and how that has been very hard. How can we best support our troops in COVID times? Is that something, Alan or Allyson, with the activities you have?
Yeah, I would be happy to speak to that. So hi, everybody. I'm Allyson Harasimowicz. I work with Blue Star Families and the chapter director for the New York region. So Blue Star Families has, I think, more like a two-layered sort of mission, because we have our national Blue Star Families that really does big campaigns. And then we have our local chapter Blue Star Families. And so for me, I'm a mill spouse as well. My husband was in the Air Force for 25 years, and we've had 4 kids, and, you know, the 13 moves and the unbelievable amount of schools and all that. And so how Blue Star Family started was with about 12 years ago, with a handful of military spouses, just recognizing that struggle that our military families are having, as that it's a constant transition. It's, I'm in a place for a certain amount of time, and now it's time to go. And so normally you would build those strong kind of roots, those community roots, when you're in a place for a while. So Blue Star Families really works to help our families be stronger in order to connect them to their communities, knowing that they normally have that 2-3 year time frame of how can we help our families feel an active part of their community, so that they have just that feeling, that feeling of isolation can get less and less, so they can feel like they are remembered, so they can feel like they can be an active part of it, so they can get their families involved. And so we, Blue Star Families, recognize that, and especially a high majority of us are all either have been active duty or spouses, and both on many cases. So we've lived that life. And so our mission is truly to work hard to strengthen our military families through their communities in building those programs and having those opportunities for our families to get out of that, the home that they're in, and just recognize the community that they're in, and feel an active part of it. And then once the family is feeling that sense of security, hopefully, then that military service member can do the job the way they need to do, in order that, because they feel better that their families are feeling a positive part of the community.
Great. Aaron, can you tell a little bit about what you're doing at the Sierra Club, some of the programs you're doing right now during COVID?
Sure. Well, the Military Outdoors at the Sierra Club is really focused on providing veterans an opportunity to participate in different types of outdoor therapies. One is known as outdoor adventure education, which would be exploring the nature nearby without a clinician or a therapist involved. Usually with a group of other vets or friends or family, you get that social connectedness and a chance to spend time outside, which is, as we know, is beneficial. And the other half of that is when we have clinicians involved in more focused therapeutic work. But the Sierra Club doesn't run guided trips. So with the COVID pandemic, we really shifted our focus to public policies. If you're here in New York, later this summer, there's a program called Outdoor RX that's going to be produced here in New York. It's the result of legislation called the Outdoor RX Act. And what it's going to do is better coordinate a number of different state agencies, like the Department of Environmental Conservation, which manages over 4 million acres of accessible public land in the state. The Parks and Historic Preservation, which has 120 state parks and all sorts of different facilities, including golf courses and swimming pools and beaches. this great outdoor educational system in place. The Office of Mental Health and other agencies at the state level to produce a way for veterans to more easily access state parks and public lands, either individually with their friends or family, or with structured programming that may or may not currently exist in the state, where you would have an opportunity to sign up to be part of a hiking club or to go camping. So there's a wider range of outdoor activities that we're going to see be emerging from the pandemic over the summer. Currently, there's not too much done other than at the Department of Environmental Conservation. I'll drop a link into the chat window for anybody who's interested. And they have, and the DEC, if you're not familiar with them, is probably, well, in our opinion, the best outdoor educator in the state. Their responsibilities are very large with managing our lands and hunting licenses and fishing access and everything else. They run a program called Adventure at Home, where they help guide you through, and links in the chat window now, where they help guide you through how to design adventure that you can take yourself and your family on during the pandemic. So the question about the isolated member of the military, that's a common occurrence for anybody during this pandemic. And that's why the DEC started this Adventure from Home program. It's purely outdoor education, and it's inspiring folks to access the nearby nature that they can get to by walking out their door, or maybe taking a train somewhere, but nothing that requires you to travel great distances, and no need to join another group of veterans to participate.
Thank you. Sounds
Aaron,
great.
would you mind if I spoke to that just a little bit for a second
Sure.
there? Thank you, appreciate that. So Aaron totally inspired me to talk about a few things. So being a chapter director, a big portion of what my job was prior to COVID was getting out in the communities and having so many opportunities, either at parks or museums or theaters or wherever it may be, to bring our families from their homes out in the community. So when COVID hit, it was a bit of a shake of, okay, this is a good portion of my job. How am I going to continue to engage with our families? Because the needs have not lessened. And in fact, we're finding probably increased. So we had to really quickly pivot to building all of our program to be virtual. And so, with difficulties comes innovation as well. So initially we just started doing simple things like having, we call them coffee connects, morning coffee connects, virtual coffee connects, because we have a great partnership with Starbucks. And we found people were coming, like regularly coming, and we kept seeing a lot of times the same families, where it got to the point where one service member mentioned of how grateful it was just to have that time of, there was nothing to do but just come and talk and chat and release. And we became like a little family, just this one little thing that we started doing. And then we started growing our programs, where we got to one thing that was hugely successful. And we're going to do it again this year, even if we didn't need it to be totally virtual. It was just such a success. We ended up putting together a virtual summer camp, and we had over like 300 or 400 families get involved in this. And it was a 4-week long, everything was virtual. We got so many great partnerships with different national parks throughout the United States that would build their virtual program, and then they would come on to us, or it would be museums and they'd say, okay, we're going to build our virtual program, and it would be a part of this summer camp. So we just found we were doing the same kind of thing, just in a whole different kind of new normal format. And it was incredible, the amount of engagement. I think nothing lessened and possibly got more. We had the same amount of families and same amount of interest, and it's been an incredible year of really difficult, just a difficult year in general, but finding ways to keep that level of engagement. And it's been, we've just been seeing some of the silver linings that have come from it.
Sure. Thank you.
I also wanted to make a comment. I'm sorry, Sharon.
Sure.
I
Please.
just wanted to remind that I know there are several providers on this call, and I just want to remind everyone we're all in this together. There is no such thing as my veterans, my patients, my clients. We're all in this together. I mean, I've teamed up with Allyson, and she has selflessly decided to work with me. God bless her. And Alan also has been a phenomenal support system for our veterans. And, you know, he's my go-to guy when I just don't know, because I am not a mental health professional. Joe Hunt is also a phenomenal support system for me as a veteran. And I know that if there is anyone that could use some rational guidance, it won't come from me. It would definitely come from Mr. Joe Hunt. But we cannot forget that we have to set aside our biases and whatever else is going on with us, and we all have to work together. We definitely, especially in Westchester, we're a small community, and we definitely do need each other at whatever capacity when we're working with veterans and their family members, which, as you know, is our support system. Without them, we are nothing. So
Well
I just
said.
want to remind
Well
everyone
said.
here.
Thank you. No, it's very good. It's a big team effort, and I appreciate everybody on the call. So let's switch gears here for a second, and someone had asked, what role does medication play in the reduction of PTSD symptoms?
I can field this one, Sharon, if you'd like.
Thank you, Matthew.
Good evening, everybody. Matt Ryba with NewYork-Presbyterian's Military Family Wellness Center. It's a broad question. What role does medication play in reduction of PTSD symptoms? And I will say that pharmacotherapy is one of the tools in the toolkit that we can use. PTSD is a very, very complex. There are a lot of different symptoms. Not all present themselves at the same time. Not all will present themselves. Some people have a mix. You know, if you look in the diagnostic manual, there's a giant list of things that could end up comprising the diagnosis of PTSD. What we do is, at least at our center, we can refer out to a psychiatrist for pharmacotherapy if we think it would be helpful. For example, if you're having trouble sleeping and that's the main issue, there are sleep aids that might help. If you're struggling with depression or anxiety, there are medications that can help with those specific symptoms. However, there's not a single catch-all that you can take a magic pill and PTSD goes away. We like to inform our patients as much as we can about the other options for therapies that are out there. At our clinic, we also offer prolonged exposure therapy, interpersonal therapy, a wide range of cognitive therapies, behavior processing. And a lot of these can be used in conjunction with medication to get better results. Sometimes the talk therapy is all that's needed. There's no one cure-all. I mean, even our best modalities work 50% of the time, and every veteran their experience is different, their trauma is different, and they react differently to the different kinds of, be it medication or therapy that they would be receiving. So I would say use caution, and I'll also speak just on behalf of myself and my peers as a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan. I was in the Marine Corps for 10 years in the infantry with 6 career deployments. And a lot of my peers are not really amenable to medication. And they feel that when they returned home from conflict and were having issues, they were just issued pills to take and told that the problems would go away, and they didn't. And it's, you know, good to explore other options. There's a lot of new therapies that are coming out that we're currently researching at Columbia Medical and at Weill Cornell as well, which are our 2 sites where we host the Military Family Wellness Center. We just recently wrapped an open trial for equine therapy that was very good results. We actually had a publication through Wiley Press in the journal Brain Imaging come out 2 weeks ago that we were able to show actual physical changes in the brain as a result pre and post equine therapy, which is pretty amazing stuff. Another very hot research area right now is psychedelic medicines with PTSD. I know Rick Doblin's group up at MAPS has had a lot of success with MDMA therapy. We're studying ketamine therapy at Columbia as well. But something that should be noted is that with all these psychedelic therapies, that's only one component. There is still a talk component. There's still a prolonged exposure therapy component. You're with a psychologist, you're talking through your problems, you're doing the actual therapy itself. It's not a magical medication that you take and it goes away. These are catalysts that kind of help you through the therapy and might get you better results. But medication itself might not be the answer. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. So Dr. Hoge was talking earlier about stigma, and we have a question about stigma towards PTSD and feels that it's lessened, but still there. You know, a veteran that will not refer to it as PTSD, rather only PTS, as he will firmly state, and that's not a disorder. How can we help lessen this stigma? Alan, maybe? Yeah.
Thank you. I was thinking about that one. Appreciate it. Hi, everyone. I'm Alan Ivicic. I'm the director of the White Plains Vet Center. The Vet Center program, we're sort of like the front facing of the Department of Veteran Affairs. We're in the community. We're doing lots of outreach, and we do non-medical readjustment counseling, which basically means it doesn't matter what you want to call it. You're having a problem in your life, and we can offer some counseling or some coffee or helping you with job search or helping you with housing or marital issues following return from your deployment. And I think the whole point of the Vet Center program is a lot of the vets don't want to go into, they don't want to go to the VA when they return from Vietnam. So the Vet Center program was created to offer peer counseling for them. And it kind of grew into this more professional clinician environment. I think with the stigma, one of the first things we do is we normalize it for them, and we frame it as protective. It's hard to turn off training. And when you're back in the community and you're trying to get back to life, that training, you have to kind of relearn. And so I think Callus Health and Stigma, we have these conversations. And I see our role in the Vet Center. If you have a veteran or you have a family member of a veteran, you send them in. And our goal is to help them any way we can. If we can't, we get it to someone else here who can help. That's our role.
Thank you. A lot of our folks that are police officers served in the military before this, and they did a few tours of war. How can we support them internally, and what type of services can we provide our police officers and law enforcement? Anyone on that?
I just want to say that we are initiating a peer group for police officers next month. We try to initiate a peer group pre-COVID, and of course, COVID happened. But I think police officers are often mixed up with law enforcement, and that's to me, in my experience and my friends and the people I've spoken to, law enforcement encompasses more than one career. And I think police officers are in a very different type of sector in law enforcement, and they need their own dedicated space, especially if they're reservists and they're going and coming back. A lot of police officers are very afraid to reach out for help. I've met with a couple that just wanted to connect with another veteran and say, hey, I am really struggling, without the fear of losing their job. So I think police officers need to have someone understand and give them their space, and they need to connect with peers so that they can open completely, and visit the vet center as well, and talk about whatever is going on without the fear of repercussion. And that is all I know.
Okay.
And I can offer.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. So medication only, Matthew was talking about this a little bit earlier, it only plays a role when the individual wants it in their plan. Let's see. It's only one option and there's so many others. Okay, that was just a comment. I'm sorry. Joe, what are the services that you provide at the coalition? Can you tell me how you advocate for veterans?
Well, the coalition's primary responsibility is to provide educational and skills training we're the Veterans Mental Health Coalition. We have about 380 members, about 870 members from 370 different organizations. And about 80% of them are civilian non-mental health providers. So they really have no familiarity with military culture or the unique needs of the service members. So our job is really to train them and to advocate. Our advocacy is really around having more transparency around suicide rates in New York State, other social determinants that can lead to people being at risk, for example, homelessness, unemployment, food insecurity, things like that, particularly in COVID. That it really, someone mentioned it earlier, I think Andrea, our focus is really on getting more collaboration. I think the not-for-profit world in general has always been focused on body count to please the funder, and very unwilling to necessarily send the veteran that's having another type of issue, a mental health issue in particular,
Sure.
to someone else who may be able to claim that veteran for fear of losing them. So our focus is really to encourage more partnerships. We'd like to have every provider have a mental health partner. Anecdotally, I've surveyed all of our participants, and everyone has a go-to person, but generally there's no policy, even in big organizations, about how to handle a mental health referral. We've actually worked with the America Serves Network, the IVMF network. Of their 65,000 requests, less than 1% was for mental health or substance use. Yet the RAND study said that 34% of the veterans returning to New York State indicated that they may need help with substance use or mental health issues. Yet we know from the research that less than a third people seek treatment. So there's this very strange circumstance. I mean, part of it is stigma. In fact, I think the moment you say mental health, you've killed the interest right there. I'd like to think about it as emotional well-being or emotional health or emotional fitness, because not everyone needs clinical support. I mean, our former commissioner was was a big promoter of this kind of a continuum, which is returning veterans should get involved in something like Team Red, White, and Blue, or the Sierra Club, where they find fellowship, but they also have the opportunity to engage with the civilian community. I connected the Team Red, White, and Blue with the New York City Cycle Club. Had the board of directors at the Cycle Club said, "What do we say to them? What are we?" I said, "Ask them what kind of bike they have. Talk to them like you're just, like anybody else that you would be happy to meet." I think we talked about stigma before. That's another thing that's really odd, because on one hand, I know veterans don't identify as veterans because they don't want to get tagged. And on the other hand, by not identifying as veterans, civilians are working for or working with or having a beer or going fishing with someone who's a veteran, but they only know what the news tells them. So the divide is kind of, it's fixed.
Can I expand for a minute on Joe's comment, please?
Sure.
So I've been working in the New York City area since about 2014. I've worked with Joe quite a bit. Matthew and I have crossed paths a few times. Some of you I've never met before. And I'm currently in Putnam County, but I still work primarily to support the state of New York. And my observations have been that for all the effort we put into this, we're still missing a lot on how we coordinate and synchronize with each other at the local and community level. I do believe that for veterans to make a transition into a healthy and purposeful civilian life, which many of them do just fine, but some of us need some help along the way. And I think that the best opportunities for feasible and effective solutions lie within our communities themselves, not having somebody go off to spend a week somewhere else in the country or have a hard time finding the support they need, especially with the marginalized populations. The groups that I tend, when I physically reach into the city to work with the veteran community, I go looking for the elderly Black veterans or the elderly women veterans, because nobody's really asking them if they want to take a walk in the woods. You don't have to be physically fit or able-bodied or a white male to spend time out in nature and enjoy it. You can be anybody if the spaces that are created are safe and accessible, and it's an inclusive and equitable type of program. And everybody who's on the panel here obviously is working towards that end of creating inclusive spaces for veterans to feel welcome so they can receive the care that they want. But again, I get back to the folks who just don't know what they don't know. And they live right on the same streets of the places that we're working at. And we have to do a better job in coordinating our efforts so that when somebody says that they would like to get help, we know where to refer them to. Even I should know where to refer them to. I know where Alan's office is. I've referred people to there in the past, but I'm not too familiar with other parts of the region, right? So I either self-educate or I figure it out as we're going along, one or the other. The structure, I believe, to help organizations like ours and yours to better work together, know about each other is not there. We used to get together, right, Joe, in the city? Yep, but we're not doing that right now at all.
Have to start Zooming and connecting. So there have been some folks referencing to the Law Enforcement Officers Weekend. That's in the chat if anybody's interested, leoweekend.com. It's a great resource for military. And then we do have an additional question referring to connectiveness between homelessness, PTSD, and substance misuse. Is it common to see dual diagnoses? And that might be back to Dr. Hoge.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that we, as clinicians, we almost never see PTSD in isolation. PTSD is almost always associated with other health concerns. So individuals who've PTSD, we codify it as a mental health condition, but the reality is it's a physiological condition that affects the whole body. And so individuals who have PTSD have higher rates of medical health concerns in all categories of illness. They have higher rates of other what we call comorbid or coexisting mental health concerns like depression or substance misuse. And of course, you know, trauma is a big risk factor for, you know, for a variety of outcomes, including homelessness. So yeah, there's a big coexistence of conditions, and that also makes it challenging for treatment, because sometimes, you know, sometimes you have to make decisions about what treatment is necessary initially, you know, how you're going to stage treatment, so to speak. So yeah, it's challenging.
Sure. Matthew, who can use the Military Wellness Center? Is it just for veterans or families? And how does it cost? You know, what are the costs based on?
That's a fantastic question, and thank you for asking it. The Military Family Wellness Center is available to all active duty, Guard, reservists, veterans of all eras and discharge statuses, and their immediate family members and caregivers. So we have a very wide range of people that we serve. We typically see a lot of patients that come through who either don't qualify for VA services or just are not amenable to using the VA services if they do qualify. It's very easy to get an appointment. We'll just do a quick phone screen with you. Usually takes about 5 minutes to kind of figure out what the issues are. And then we can schedule an intake evaluation. There's no cost. We are philanthropically funded. So it's no cost to the patient, and everything is confidential. We follow all the state and federal HIPAA guidelines. So there's no worry about any confidentiality issues. So yeah, very kind of loose parameters for qualification, and we're happy to help anybody who needs it.
Fantastic. And you're all in both the Bronx and White Plains, right?
We have 3 locations. We have a location at Columbia University Medical Center, which is in Washington Heights. We have a location at Weill Cornell Medicine, which is on the Upper East Side. And we do have a physical location on Bloomingdale Ave up in Westchester. At the moment, All of our sites are doing virtual appointments, so we do have telehealth medicine available for all of our therapies as well, and everything can be conducted securely over Zoom. But yes, once we do reopen our in-person clinics, those are the 3 sites that we operate out of.
Super. Alan, can the VA center help with help someone manage their healthcare bills or their prescriptions, or how can they help someone that doesn't know how to handle their finances or those types of things?
Well, it kind of depends on the severity. If you're talking about someone who can't handle their finances to a point where they need a fiduciary, they need someone else in charge of their finances, that's one end of the spectrum. The other end, if you just need someone who needs like concrete help sorting things out, that's something we can surely help with, or find someone who can help them with.
Sure.
Hope I answered your question.
Yeah, sure. And I'm just going to go back to Andrea with Family Services of Westchester. Can you tell me a little bit more about how they work with veterans?
Sure. So we provide social events, also peer groups. Of course, everything is virtual. All our events, groups, anything we provide are free to the veteran and families of veterans. We also have a clinic, but we usually refer to the vet center with Alan, or anyone that has a bit more of experience working with veterans. But if we have an emergency situation, we do have a clinic, and veterans do have priority.
Super.
And it's a sliding scale.
Good to know. Good to know.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we're going to provide all these resources at the end for folks. And Joe, do you want to speak to the advocacy that's going on at the coalition?
Right now, it's about data transparency, because while we provide education and training, the Vet Connect system just didn't work, so we have no idea whether we're having any effect or not. Our big focus is, we know that most veterans that have a probable diagnosis have other priorities, particularly those that are seeking housing or employment. So our focus is on non-mental health providers and teaching them how to identify someone who may have a substance use or emotional disorder, and how to engage that veteran and make a referral. We see them as the gateway to mental health.
Okay.
But without being able to see what sort of activity we're getting as a result, we don't know how effective we are. So we're after the Department of Veteran Services to do that.
Sure.
There's actually something that's quite new. There's a new program. It's kind of the expansion of Vet Connect to across NYC Well. It's on the Unitas platform. It's called Unite NYC. So they're trying to combine all of the local services and military services in one database, so that if a veteran calls, they may be referred to a community provider as well who can provide a solution. We're very hopeful about that, assuming they're willing to share the data.
Great, great. And we're just getting near the top of the hour, and we can take a few more questions if need be. And I'm actually going to look at this last question and share. Our executive director has some notes as well. This is a two-part question. What are the most urgent risk factors confronting military children today, especially during the pandemic? And the second part would be, do adverse childhood experience increase service members' risk of developing PTSD? So we're talking about the military children.
Where's Allyson?
Anyone able
Sorry,
to
just had a
answer that?
call from my boss. Actually, can you repeat that? I'm so sorry.
Certainly. What are the most urgent risk factors confronting military children today, especially during the pandemic? And the second part is, do adverse childhood experience increase service members' risk of developing PTSD?
Well, I think I can talk to the first part, but maybe
Okay.
someone else can go to the second.
Thank you.
So I will tell you a big issue that we're having, of course, it's not going to be a surprise, is education. That our kids are having to go to a whole new type of education system. And our families, either one or both of the parents, are having to figure out how to manage if they can stay working, which has been a big thing of the spouse employment has really been a struggle because so many have had to stop working because now they are their full-time educators for their kids. And so then the level of instruction that our kids are having, because some can just not necessarily do well in a virtual environment where their attention span is just not able to stay engaged. So I would say of all things, that is probably the biggest concern, is that our kids are getting the education that they need, and that the parents are able to balance work, education, their kids, and home life. That is probably the biggest struggle.
Sure. Okay. Anybody else with that? If not, I'm going to ask Marie Considine, our executive director, to finish us up here. Again, I thank our speakers for all they've done, and I'm going to hand it off to Marie.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming tonight. I have some information for you, and then I have the resources that I'll share at the end. So I'm going to share here. Okay, so just so that those of you are aware what NAMI Westchester does, we provide, am I on the right slide? Yeah. NAMI Westchester helps individuals living with mental illness and their loved ones to find ways to recover and build better lives. We offer virtual support groups and classes that are led by trained volunteers who can relate to the struggles of living with mental illness. So NAMI support groups follow a structured model to ensure you and others in the group have an opportunity to be heard and be helped. So we've listed a few of our support groups here. Those are open to anyone who's here tonight who might fall into one of these categories. Feel free to share with others. All of our support groups are being held virtually right now. And we've even had an uptick in attendance and frequency. So keep that in mind, please. As you'll see on the slides, there's a logo that says NAMI Homefront. So that's a program that NAMI has devised that we haven't been able to offer yet, but we are hoping to do so. That's one of our goals with this program that we're doing tonight and our upcoming events. So NAMI Homefront is another NAMI signature program. It's a free 6-session educational program for families, caregivers, and friends of military service members and veterans who have mental health conditions. So it's based on the NAMI Family to Family program, for those of you who are familiar with that. It's based on that, but it's for this new population. It's designed to address the unique needs of family, caregivers, and friends of those who have served or are currently serving our country. The program is taught by trained family members of service members or veterans who have mental health conditions. So right now, the program is being offered online at your own pace. But the idea is if we can get some people to participate and take this course, then there's a training that people who have gone through the program can then be trained to be facilitators. And we'd really like to have this in person at some point later this year. So that's our goal. So if you fall into any of these categories and you're interested, please contact us. The contact information is, kind of all over, and hope that you'll follow up on that. I want to thank Dr. Hoge tonight, our keynote speaker, and I of course like to thank our panelists, Allyson, Joe, Alan, Aaron, Andrea, and Matthew, and of course Sharon Mescivecchio, our Director of Development, who put this whole forum together so beautifully. And of course, thank our sponsors, NewYork-Presbyterian Military Family Wellness Center, the Mental Health Association of Westchester, WHUD, and the Peak, who did some nice PSAs. Hopefully some of you heard that on the radio. Now, as promised, here are some resources that are available in our area.